one. Definitely have one more here. Okay, so we're about to start. Welcome to the dev room of Postgres. Sorry,
dev room, you're unwelcome.
Sorry about that. So our next speaker comes almost every year to FOSDEM, all the way from a very far away front country. You will figure out from his name. He not only comes to Belgium in FOSDEM time, but he also comes during the Postgres conference in Belgium, which is in May, because he loves cycling and he loves beer, which is something very difficult from Belgium. That's why he comes here. He's going to talk about his expertise on Postgres anyway. And if you have very good questions, people is giving up to 10 euros for these balls. But if you give me a good question for Ilya, you can get this for free now after you ask your question. Okay? So please welcome Ilya Kosmodyniaski.
Thank you, Boris. So it's very neat from Boris not to give the stress ball before the talk, and it's only after the question that I have a chance to leave. So, hi everyone, I'm Ilya. Maybe if you've been for FOSDEM before, you saw me already. I'm working for DataGrid. We're doing some PostgreSQL services. I try to do PostgreSQL services as well, but regret to say I do more Excel nowadays. But still, we have some experience in upgrading PostgreSQL installations, and I will share some information we have to you. So, just to figure out, who already runs PostgreSQL 12? Oh, maybe someone runs 13? Cheater. That's why nobody runs 13 yet. So, 10? 9.6? 9.5? 9.4? You need to upgrade probably several days already. 7? Okay. Yeah. Just to figure out how many people need actually to upgrade and on what version specific things I need to concentrate. Anyway, so why I prepare on this talk? Because upgrading your PostgreSQL is not a rocket science. It's actually quite easy job to do. But all this, there are some small details which are actually completely, which could completely ruin all your process. So basically, if you take a look on the documentation of how to upgrade Postgres using PG upgrade, it's simple, pretty much straightforward. But if you have really heavy loaded database and you are not concentrated on some small details, you can ruin your database. And this is actually a key problem for upgrades. So you can get downtime, which you don't want. You can ruin your database. You can ruin your data, which is not the same thing that ruining database. It's even worse, because if you don't have a backup, for example, it could be a big problem. And you need to know your system, not only your database, but, for example, how your application works, from which host it goes, which features of database it uses, and so on. So, besides of that, long preparation time, long planning time, maybe night shift, and because of this, most DBAs do not like upgrades. I don't know, who considers himself as DBA? Okay. Who likes to upgrade databases? Okay, me too, because, you know, I'm that person who normally works with Excel, so then I have a chance to look in Postgres. I'm really happy. But most of the DBAs are actually scaring of upgrades, and they are attached to outdated versions. And this is like sort of catch-22. So you know which sort of surgeon is the best surgeon. That one which makes lots of manual work, lots of operations. So basically, the cardio surgeon is supposed to do his job like every day, and then he is fit enough to do the routine operations quite successfully. And that's the problem with upgrades. If you are sticky to an old version, maybe then it would be necessary to upgrade. you do not have required skill because you do not do upgrades quite frequently. And that could be a problem. You will ruin those things because you do it that rarely. So any upgrade became a major stress for you, and that's a bad thing for your database you're trying to keep safe and up and running. So my suggestion actually, I can understand if your production environment should work on certain version more than 1 year. It's quite acceptable. Maybe you need sort of security audit, some other requirements which cannot allow you to upgrade to like every year then we have a new release of Postgres. But even if you do not upgrade your productive environment, just set up the stage, put the same amount of data there and try to upgrade. So basically if you see Devrim pushes a new package, try to upgrade. You will get that practice in your fingers, and that really will help you to do real upgrades successfully. Why we need to upgrade? Obviously, bug fixes, security fixes, things like this. So basically, you can only be safe if you are upgraded, because there are lots of issues which are rising from time to time, and we need to fix them. Recently, I would say over the last 5 years at least, maybe even like last 10 years, the tempo Postgres takes is incredibly fast. So people bring in new features that improves performance quite drastically. So and now actually many software developers are much more agile than they used to be like in a bank 20 years ago. So they want new features. They want new features of JSON. They want new features of something. And as a DBA, you actually supposed to help developers. If you're a developer yourself, or if you're a DevOps, you probably already know that you need to bring new features fast. So in Postgres world, it's necessary to upgrade fast, and that's part of the deal. And when you're upgrading on time, it makes it easier. So if you run something 7 something right now, I would say like call me. So I cannot explain that in one talk or even in a tutorial, because for such upgrade which is not on time, you will need a lot of like preparation, a lot of investigation, what we supposed to do, and so on. So like then you upgrade like within this window, then you need to upgrade like in once a year, once in 2 years, once in 3 years. It would be quite okay, but upgrading from very old version, it's like complicated task. And well, I personally appreciate if you run 7 something or 8 something, because well, as consultants we are happy to meet such customers. It's our favorite. So one big corporation with starting with letter O, they just double the prices of the support for old versions. But well, as a community member, I always advise you to upgrade. So in PostgreSQL world, we have a very specific term which goes major upgrades and minor upgrades. What is all about? Previously, we used to have a very ridiculous version numbering. So it was like 9.4 or 0.3. So we basically used to have 2 major release numbers and 1 minor release numbers. It was very confusing, and that's why we moved to modern, after 9.6, system of numeration like 10 point something, and one is major, one is minor. So basically once a year there is a major release which includes new features. And after that, because new features always bring not only fun, well, fun, it's still fun, but also lots of bugs because people rework on the backend. So we need to fix them, and we have during a year lots of minor releases, and we need to perform minor upgrades. So the definition is, in major upgrades we run new features, in minor there are no new features. It's like fixing old stuff. So it's really important to distinguish that, and because of that nature of major upgrades, the methods of upgrading databases is different. And there is some sort rule of thumb. Now we're probably supposed to upgrade to version 12. Why? So version 12 was like in the autumn, and it was like 12.0. And I generally do not recommend to install any sort of PostgreSQL in mission-critical production which has no minor upgrades yet, because those new features bring in lots of bugs. So generally, I would say from version 8, I have some sort of not very accurate statistics, and I would say like it's a half a year after the release. So basically, you can start if you really if you upgrade first some staging, then non-productive environment. After that, you can try to start upgrading your productive environment, like version 12.2 to 12.3. It's usually like half a year from initial release. But that's like really some sort of catch-22 as well, because we need to fix the bugs, and if nobody upgrades, that is difficult. But well, there are people who upgrade just immediately because developers want new features. So a rule of thumb still works. Before any upgrade, that's like a very important rule, read carefully version-specific release notes, because sometimes there are some specific issues with upgrade procedure, and they are always in the release notes. So basically, take a look on that very carefully. Like if you are a successful PostgreSQL DBA, you will learn even release notes in your smartphone when you update in your application. So it's like automatic sanity check. Play with upgrade method you like several times before you perform actual upgrade, because something can go wrong and there could be lots of problems. Talk to your development team. If they want this major version upgrade, if they have some different issues, if they use something outdated things which are mentioned in release notes. So basically, a good idea is actually to sit with your, I don't know, architect who is responsible for application level and read the release notes carefully together, just to align. Of course, nobody do this, but it's a good idea to do this anyway. And of course, make a backup and check it by test recovery. And it's in bold, and test recovery is most important part of this bullet, because the only guarantee that you have a proper backup is that you checked recovery, that it is recovers. Cross-check, check some things like this, they do not have any guarantee. So basically, test that you do not lose your data, because upgrade could be a risky process. Minor upgrades are theoretically easy. You simply install new binaries, start new database on the new data directory. So there are no new features, the binary format is the same, completely easy. Still, there are some issues. First issue is when your data is supposed to be online, you probably want to pause PG balancer, things like this, and then you're stopping your database. It could stop like long time, because you have lots of dirty pages and they need to be checkpointed to the disk. And if you do not play enough with this upgrade method, you will run into problems, because, for example, you're trying to stop, you have some technological window like several seconds to restart your database, it takes longer, you became nervous, somebody calls you and says our database is offline, things like this. Then you try to stop database with -m, you ruin your database, and well, it's bad practice, so don't do like this. Issue checkpoint like several times, then start to stop database, then it goes smoothly. So just prepare, play with all these combinations, not to ruin actually very easy procedure compared to another one. And another thing, keep an eye of upgrading all the related packages. So yeah, of course, do backup and check recovery. As you do, it's like default point everywhere. So check all the packages which could contain something considering Postgres, because if you do not upgrade PostgreSQL client, that's okay. Probably you will get that warning. Your software developers would get that warning. You upgrade them later. But if you use some sort of contrips, if you use some debug symbols, things like this, you should be aware that you upgraded everything, and especially things like PG Bouncer, things like application level libraries, drivers, and so on. So basically, the good practice is to have everything of the same version, because there could be issues. Major upgrade methods are much more complicated because internal structures could be quite different. So for that purpose, we have several methods, and we can choose which method is less dangerous. Good old dump restore, PG upgrade, and some replication-based methods. That's the set we have, and we can try to do this. PG dump is a good way to upgrade your PostgreSQL instance, if you can afford this. Because if you have a large database, if this database is heavy loaded, it could be really tricky to upgrade with PG dump. But if you can afford this, if you have like a couple of hundreds gigabytes of data, it's not really heavy loaded, it could be good. You are on the safe side because it's a simple method. You can do that quickly and you will be happy. It's a frequent question actually, how I should upgrade my database if I run Postgres inside Docker. Most of the things I'm talking about here are for just normal server, not a container. Because usually if you run database in container, it's like, if it's small database for some microservice, for some team which showed up and doing some research or things like this, it's a small database inside the container. You have the data on outside disk. It's not big enough, it's not heavy loaded. Because usually if it's like this, you run into problems before you're thinking of upgrade. So it basically would be much more earlier. So PG dump is good way to do upgrade with Docker. There is some project of running PG upgrade inside Docker. I think it's called Docker PG upgrade. It basically runs PG upgrade inside the container. I tried to play with that. I do not claim I saw that in production, but then I played that on my computer. Actually, I run into problems several times. So basically, I would not advise to do this. So try to keep PG dump. Problem is, if you have requirements on downtime, that could be tricky to do this. Another problem is disk space can be quite expensive, and for PG upgrade using dump restore, most likely you need extra disk space, or you need work with some tricky procedure which can ruin your data. Good thing, it works with any PostgreSQL version since 9.7, but there could be some issues. But theoretically, you can upgrade even from very old versions, because it has nothing to do with binary format. It has only to do with your schema, with logical structure. So it's not like data files. So nothing changed there. But for example, if you have really old database on old version and you use intensively stored procedures, something was changing during that time, and you need actually check compatibility of your server logic in this case. And that could be tricky actually. PGDump has option of custom format. You can compress this, and it's proper way to do the PGDump. And it can save you some disk space. Actually, PGDump can do several jobs, so it can do things in parallel. And in some cases, you just need to experiment with this. It could be good for you because it would be easier and faster. But problem is if you do tricky things like pgdump from this port and in pipe you restore to another port to save some time to do that faster. I do not recommend to do this. Don't do it at home, but you can try. You can not do this using multiple jobs, so just figure out what you need actually and try with jobs or without. And if your installation can be upgraded like this, that's good. Congratulations. That's not tricky anymore. And that was probably, you will be happy about this. A small notice which actually would be quite useful for us on the future slides as well. Don't forget about locales. So basically, especially if you are not only using English, if you're using French, German, Russian, Dutch, something which requires specific locale, you can be actually run into problem if you initialize your new database in different locale or just forget to initialize and using default locale. Everything goes okay normally. So you can dump, restore, and at some point you will figure out that sorts do not work properly, things like this. You can spend lots of time on troubleshooting those things. So put on your checklist actually that you need to double check the locale, and it's supposed to be exactly the same. Major upgrade using pgdump, the procedure is quite easy. You install new binaries, initialize new cluster, don't forget about locale, change config files appropriately. That could be a problem, just like with failover and switchover. Don't forget that you need pghba.conf, same like on your old database, because after that you will let application work with the database and it doesn't work. That's the common problem. So keep an eye on that, synchronize those things. That could be a very good idea to use the newer version pgdump, but if you're upgrading from really old version, there could be issues with really old things. And again, read release notes, use the newer one. If you're working with something very old, just test that 10 times. Then restore your dump and try to figure out if everything is okay. Test it, see if application works, nothing strange, and so on. Then switch your application to the new cluster. And usually, because we run into such problems many times, do not delete your old cluster immediately. Even if there's not quite much disk space, keep it for some time, because something can go wrong and could be a problem. PG upgrade for major upgrades. I would say that's a major method we use, and it's tricky, but actually it's most useful one. Procedure is simple as well. But to figure out how to do this, we need to figure out how it works. And based on that, we need to choose the way how we upgrade. It would be slightly different for just standalone server, for primary hot standby configuration, and for some tricky situations, then you really have very small technological window to perform the upgrade. Then you could not allow your downtime. And of course, details. So PG upgrade is a very smart idea. You have old and new database cluster, and there is a mechanism which actually takes the old binary files and detach them from the old cluster somehow, and then moves all the information Postgres needs for normal work, like transaction ID counter, like PG catalog, statistics is tricky thing, and moves that to the new thing. And then you take the user data and add that to a new database, and it works like this. So theoretically, the basic idea is very simple. And well, Bruce Momsen wrote this tool like many years ago, and since that time it's online, it works. But there are tricks. So the idea is, first we decouple pgclog from new cluster, couple old pgclog to a new cluster, and set the proc seed, which allows us actually to run database from the same point, from the same transaction. Then we restore the schema, all the things we need to operate with our database normally. And then we did that. If the data files with user data would be the same, everything's supposed to be the same, because we have the same schema, we have the same transaction visibility map and things like this. So we basically copy them, link them, or clone them to new cluster, and it looks like the old one. It sounds like slightly tricky, and it is. So procedure is like this. You create empty database for a new version of PostgreSQL. Don't forget about locale, things like this. Stop database with old PostgreSQL version. Of course, you need, if you can, prevent application to connect, because it can ruin things. We need afford some sort of downtime. If you're using PG Bouncer, you can put PG Bouncer on pause, and those connections from the application will wait. So theoretically, it will minimize downtime again. Then you start upgrade procedure with PG upgrade command. It's like, there is a documentation, it's quite obvious in this case. Then you, after it successfully finishes, you start database on a new version. Then you start to collect statistics, because during this procedure, statistics is the new. So PostgreSQL do not bring old statistics to a new cluster. PG upgrade doesn't do this. And you need to recollect the new statistics, because if statistic is different, plans would be different. If it's heavy loaded database, it could be an issue. Then the statistic collection started. At some point, you can open your database for new connections. Of course, if you do not have really high transaction rate, you can do that immediately and collect statistics. But if you have really lots of transactions, most likely you start collecting statistics. Then it says your like 10% of your statistics is collected. Then you can open database, and database proceed to collect statistics, but already some plans would be quite okay. This process is tricky, so then you do this. Keep an eye that there are not a lot of logs, and based on that, probably let database to collect statistics slightly longer. After several upgrades, you will figure out that you need, for example, a slightly longer technological window. So basically, it's like it's thing which comes with experience. Minimizing downtime. PG Bouncer has a very good feature, pause resume. Again, your intention is to pause PG Bouncer, and then it is paused, quickly restart the database, and it's like, it's tricky thing, so it's basically like, many things could go wrong. Issue the checkpoint to let your server actually stop quicker. And then you can use -k link to do the PG upgrade like very fast. So basically, PG upgrade has two major regimes. It can copy files, and that is tricky because it's like PG dump. You need extra time to copy things from one location to another one, and it has a problem that you need again double disk space. So that's why for heavy loaded database we use this relink thing, and that makes PG upgrade extremely dangerous, because if relink doesn't work, you can lose your data. So always think twice. If your database is not big enough, and if you can afford like a minute more of downtime, most likely you can move the things with copying. If you can afford this, do this. Use relink only if you have very, very strong requirements on downtime. because it's much better to have a downtime of several minutes than a couple of hours return from backup, things like this. But everything depends on planning. So common question is what to upgrade first, a hot standby or primary or whatever. My suggestion is actually first you upgrade primary as it is a standalone server. So just upgrade it, leave your replicas alone. If something goes wrong, for example with relinking things, you can just promote the replica, breathe, and repeat the process from the beginning. So basically you will be on a safe side because switching to the replica, it's a smooth process. You most likely do that frequently, so you can do this. Don't try to upgrade everything simultaneously, most likely that never ends well. Then you see that everything is upgraded, it works, it looks like your database, not like some Frankenstein style thing. Just reinstantiate your replica one by one again, and you will have your replicas, your cluster, like it is upgraded. So you pause PG Bouncer on standby, clone replica from upgraded primary using PG-based backup. Actually, documentation probably still says use rsync. I never advise to use rsync because even experienced people do make mistakes, then they do backup scripts manually. PG backup is a good tool, use it. Or using PG back rest, whatever you prefer. And then resume PG Bouncer, start connections, or start PG Bouncer, allow your application to go in. So that's procedure is like this. Now come details, which can ruin everything. There is no optimizer statistics. So there is a script which is not a part of PG upgrade. So basically PG upgrade generates a script which you need to run manually. Double check documentation about this. So basically you need to be prepared to such things. Basically it does vacuum DB -O minus analyze in stages. Analyze in stages, this is what I told you. So it just starts to analyze in parts, doesn't try to make all the analyze for entire database, which can be actually quite difficult if you have heavy workload. Since 9.5, you can run vacuum DB in parallel, and which can be extremely good if you have a large database. So don't hesitate to open this script, read what it is in it, and maybe edit it something along to your requirements, so you can use different things. We actually basically just running vacuum DB -O manually, just not using that script. We have some sort of our own. And again, keep an eye on logs. Maybe you need to stop the script because it's relatively safe, it's just statistics, and block users from connecting, or maybe block only some users which are issuing heavy updates or things like this. Then rerun statistics. So be creative, experiment on stage, not on the production, and you will be on a safe side in this regard. Documentation suggests to use rsync. I would say use PG-based backup. So there are lots of possibilities to shoot your leg, and maybe not only the leg. Some distributions like Debian Ubuntu have, of course, wrappers, which allow you to do things like semi-automatically. Never ever do that for mission-critical database. I like Debian, I like Ubuntu. They're nice people with beautiful products, with very good approach, good attitude to building the distributions. But the problem is all those wrappers increase numbers of bugs you can hit, and PG upgrade is complex enough, so don't do it. Try to do that as manually as you can. Like with the backup, it should be simple as possible. So manually. Extensions, it's important thing. Extensions is a beautiful mechanism, but slightly work in progress. So some aspects of extensions are not quite good, and one of the problem is the author of extension supposed to take care of upgrading scripts. You can never ever know if the job was done properly, and if it was done on time, then you decide to upgrade to this version. Is this extension up to date or not? Most likely, if it is extension which ships together with Postgres, it is, because people do check those things. But for third-party extensions, that's not true sometimes. So PG upgrade keeps old versions of extensions, which could be a problem because it will not work with your new database. So normally, the default prerequisite is to run cycle for all extension and perform alter extension name update. So just at the point when you're experimenting on your test database, do that. Take a look what is going on there. If you have some warnings, things like this, if something doesn't work, go for it, do it. Some extensions are known to require the special care. For example, Post.js should be updated before an upgrade, actually. So basically, after that, it would be like tricky things. But once again, don't believe me, just take a photo of this slide and work on this. Every upgrade, you need to go through release notes. Keep in mind which sort of extensions you have, and actually manually scrutinize what things you're supposed to do in order to upgrade. There are lots of improvements in PG upgrades recently. So basically, I would say that PG upgrades are getting better, faster. Now, for example, cloning is supported for newer versions of Linux kernel. It's safer than old thing with relinking, and well, it's a good thing. But be careful, you need a proper file system, and well, some people actually trying to perform PG upgrade with cloning or relinking, having database and write-ahead logs, for example, on different file systems. It never ends well. So basically, check twice. I probably, on every slide, I can repeat this. Check twice and see if it works. Using replication method to upgrade PostgreSQL. I would say that it's not the thing I would advise you, but you can try. The problem is that in spite of all the problems with PG upgrade, this thing promising you zero downtime. But you need to do lots of things manually, so it's very labor intensive, and when it is so, you usually can like miss something, forget to move some table or things like this. But sometimes it's useful. The idea is set up new database cluster, set up replication, which one is preferred for you, and then just perform a failover. Because those types of replication are working with different versions, mostly. Mostly working with different versions of Postgres. Normal binary replication doesn't. So logical replication is relatively new, promising method. And from 9.4, you can upgrade to a newer version using this. The problem is you need to check documentation carefully for each release as you do, and then figure out how to manually actually migrate your entire database. So basically, logical replication is thing designed for like partial replication. So if you need to migrate entire thing, it's lots of work for you. So just double check this. There are some things which allows you to automate the process, and check that you replicate everything you need. So don't forget about sequences, things like this, and as well, keep in mind that on your upgraded database you need users and roles and permissions and things like this. So this way of replicating data and upgrading data is more difficult. Use it only if you need really zero downtime. Slony1, it's old, really old method and still compatible with Postgres, but I would not bet that it would be compatible for a long time. And you literally can migrate from really old versions of PostgreSQL. Failover could be done very fast. So basically, it's trigger-based, even on heavy load. It works. It's nightmare to operate that for a long time, but if you only need that for an upgrade, it could be a nice thing. But it's complicated, and if you're not quite experienced person in terms of Sloany, like plan twice, read the documentation, everything is usual. But you need extra disk space, and it's trigger-based. So if it's trigger-based, it could be really very CPU intensive, both on the old server and new server. Long dice, I never ever recommended actually to use that, but some people prefer that to Sloany. Sloany is complicated nightmare. Long dice is the same thing, but not that old and not that bulletproof. So what can possibly go wrong? But the idea is like it's not under that heavy development like Sloany used to be before the binary replication and before logical replication. So it's like really buggy, and it was designed for different things like transferring data partially. So I do not recommend to use it. Conclusion. So that's some sort of a matrix what we have. We have methods, downtime, extra disk space, complexity, and risking. So PG upgrade with relink is low downtime, low disk space, complexity is high, risking is very high. But still, if you want to be on the safe side, use this one or use this one. If you have some special requirements, go for, I would say, logical replication. If it doesn't work for you for some reason, for Sloany, but most likely logical replication because it's like new method under heavy development. Nobody can guarantee that Sloany would be that good like in 5 or 3 years. So that's like a conclusion. It's a good reading list of using some of those methods. Maybe not very fresh one. So for example, this talk of Bruce is quite old, but he wrote PG upgrade, and there are lots of good explanation how it works. There are some blog posts, so enjoy, keep an eye on that. And slides would be online, video would be online, so you can return to this. And if you have questions, you can email them to me later or just ask them right now. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ilya. We do have some time for questions, so if you want, okay.
Yeah.
Let's start there. Ilya.
You have to mention migrations and the importance of migrations like Flyway. I'm familiar with migration files like Flyway. Keep track of things like extensions and lockouts when you need to do schema evolution and versioning.
Okay. So the question is how to do smooth migrations then you upgrade your application. Am I correct? So there are several tools for doing this, but I would not say there is a silver bullet for this. So basically, some ORM frameworks, things like this, like Ruby Active Record, suggest to do those migrations from the application side. I would say many people who try to use that finally ending up with like creating files on disk with alter commands and just basically manually preparing that from some internal logic they use to create the application. So I would not say some automatical tools are working good in this regard. If you keep in track on everything in your database, for example, to perform the upgrade using logical replication, that's basically like some script which goes through all the database, keep track on all the tables, and prepares commands you need to install logical replication. I would actually suggest, if you're interested particularly in that part, ask Boris these things, because he is much more experienced with logical replication, working in the company which creates that. It's like, yeah, I address you to him.
So you have a question here?
Why don't you like to use PG restore piping to PG dump to do it in parallel?
Yeah, well,
Question.
Why not? Why I do not recommend to use PG restore in a PG dump pipe PG restore. Well, you can do this, but it's not an easy thing. So basically, you can do this, but something can go wrong if you use different locale, things like this. But if you know what you're doing, welcome. Why not? We actually used to do, I think, this piping from PG dump to PSQL before actually PG restore was written. So it's really old practice.
But it makes sense migrating from one server to another.
Yes, it makes sense. It's a good question. Yeah.
One question here. How do you estimate your potential downtime for upgrades? So what patterns are you using for testing?
No, it's a good question. So the question was how to estimate downtime, how long it takes to migrate to upgrade from one server to another one. I would say that one of the best estimation is like previous upgrades. So if you know your database, you can figure it out, and even this doesn't work. I would say that's like some rule of thumbs. If you have some amount of data, if you are sure that you can actually disconnect some heavy updates from your database, you probably can guess something if you know your database, how long does it take on those disks to copy things from one location to another. It's good if you have a test server which is like the same configuration, or you can detach one of your replicas which is supposed to be the same configuration, and just try to figure out copying files, how long does it take. So it is not like proper estimation, but at least you will figure out that, for example, okay, on such disks, just copying the data files would be too long, and you need to find another method, for example. But it's like experience thing. So basically, that's why I suggest do upgrades recently and try to, for example, take your production data if it's possible. Try to do without any heavy load an upgrade and figure out how would it take on production. And basically, it's a good thing with upgrades because most likely you need to close databases for heavy changes. So it's much more easier than, for example, estimate performance on detached replica or standby. So it's a good news in this regard.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So minor upgrade. What is the order? Do you first install the packages and then you restart Postgres?
Yes.
Or you stop Postgres, update the packages, and then start Postgres? Good question.
I repeat the question. don't give him a ball. So what's the order of what's the sequence of our things? So by minor upgrade, do we install packages first, then stop Postgres, and then start Postgres, or we first stop Postgres then install packages? It depends on the distribution. Actually, but I would suggest if you can allow your downtime, be on the safe side. Stop Postgres, install new binaries, then do the things. But in real world, we actually, every time we install new binaries, trying to figure out that, for example, Debian do not spoil some things for us. And after that, we actually do stop Postgres, move to new things, and so on.
I think the RPMs also restart them when you install them. But the problem is if you have multiple instances, only the first one will start. The main one will just restart. The other one will just stay over there. But we will fix this problem in version 13.
Yeah, well, then you figure. Yeah, so there was input from Devrim that RPMs also actually restart your database. Then you try to do like I described. But my point is actually that you should do those things more manually, because you know RPMs as well as other packet managers, they allow you a lot of sort of automation things to make things for DBA simpler. But those automation is unpredictable. So basically, disable those things, try to do that manually. Then Devrim fix them. Then you will enjoy and include that on the slide that Devrim fix things. Go on, use automatic things.
Okay, one last question there.
We're going to upgrade from 10 to 12. And
Yes.
we use paging backrest for full backups and archiving from the walls. Would I need to make directly a new full backup when I did a PG upgrade?
So the question is, if you are using not PG-based backup but using PG backrest, is it applicable, everything which I told, or you need to make PG-based backup?
And then I would, if I have done the upgrade, should I immediately make a new full backup for the wall?
Well, what you understand of immediate backup, actually. So theoretically, answer is yes, because you need your backup and you cannot restore that for a new version because it's binary incompatible. But I would not suggest you to make a backup immediately if you have heavy loaded database which is right now collecting the statistics. So there is some vulnerability period, because if you will make a backup as well, it would be maybe too heavy for your database. So wait like several minutes, then start to do this. But basically you need to understand that if you upgrade it to new binaries, you do not have a backup anymore, because old backups are backups from the previous version. You need to install previous version, then upgrade, things like this. So as soon as you can, do the new binary backup or backup with PG backrest.
In our case, so
Okay.
we have
We can continue maybe then.
Yeah, you can get me outside. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.